some cities did not fade over centuries. They were shut down inside a single lifetime. A fire under one town's streets took its zip code. A soldier's fence took another town's beach for 50 years. And nearly 50,000 people packed food for 3 days, then never came back. The fire under Centralia. In February 1981, 12-year-old Todd Domboski was crossing a backyard in Centralia, Pennsylvania, when the ground opened under his feet. He dropped into a steaming hole and grabbed a tree root while hot mud and carbon monoxide rose around him. His cousin, Eric Wolfgang, 14, pulled him out of a shaft later measured at roughly 150 feet deep. Centralia was a coal town of about 1,400 people, and by then it had been sitting on a fire for 19 years. In May 1962, a burn at the town dump ignited an exposed coal seam, though some locals blamed a passing truck, and others an even older fire. Engineers proposed digging it out almost immediately. The plan stayed cheap on paper and grew expensive underground, while the fire spread through old mine tunnels beneath the houses, seeping invisible gas into basements. After the boy in the hole made national news, Congress voted $42 million to relocate the town. The government took the houses, and in 2002 the Postal Service took the zip code. State estimates say the coal could keep burning for another 250 years. Craco's sliding hill. Craco is a medieval town on a clay hilltop in southern Italy, and for more than 900 years it refused to fall. It survived earthquakes in the 1400s, the 1600s, and the 1800s while its stone houses stacked higher up the slope. Then the 20th century arrived with pipes. New water and sewer lines were laid to modernize the town, and engineers later traced what followed to those very works, as leaks soaked into the clay until the slope itself began to move. In 1963, a major landslide forced the remaining 1,800 residents down into the valley, where many families spent years in tents and barracks waiting for new homes. A flood in 1972 ended any talk of return, and the earthquake of 1980 emptied the hill for good. One elderly resident reportedly refused every relocation and lived past 100 in the dying town. Visitors today wear hard hats because pieces of Craco still break loose in strong wind. Mel Gibson filmed scenes of the Passion of the Christ among these ruins. Without the modern plumbing, the town that beat 9 centuries of earthquakes might be inhabited still. Kadykchan's last winter. Winter in the Kolyma region of far eastern Russia brings temperatures near -50, and Kadykchan existed to mine coal in exactly that cold. Prisoners of the Gulag raised the settlement in the 1940s. One of them was the writer Varlam Shalamov, who dug coal here and later described these camps in Kolyma Tales. After the camps closed, free workers moved in, and by the mid-1980s, the town had grown past 10,000 residents, with schools, a cinema, and heated apartment blocks. The Soviet Union collapsed, coal stopped paying, and one of the 2 mines shut in 1992. Then, in 1996, an explosion in the remaining mine killed 6 miners. The government closed it for good and paid people to move away. Those who lingered watched the place being dismantled around them, and major buildings were eventually blown up to make staying impossible. The census for 1986 counted more than 10,000 people. The census for 2010 counted 0. A settlement forced into existence by prisoners was finally emptied by paperwork and subsidies, with apartment doors left unlocked because there was no one left to rob. Plymouth, the buried capital. What does a capital city with a population of 0 look like? Plymouth was the capital of Montserrat, a small British island in the Caribbean, home to government offices, churches, and about 4,000 people. In July 1995, the Soufriere Hills volcano woke after centuries of quiet and began dusting the streets with gray ash. The town was evacuated, reoccupied, and evacuated again as the mountain grew louder. On June 25, 1997, pyroclastic flows, avalanches of gas and rock hot enough to burn whatever they touched, swept down and killed 19 people. An American expat named David Lee filmed the eruption, and his footage carried the disaster into living rooms around the world. Flow after flow then buried Plymouth itself, in places several stories deep, until the War Memorial Clock Tower served as a depth marker, and later rains pushed even that under. 2/3 of the islanders left, many for Britain. the government moved north to Bredas, officially a temporary arrangement. That was almost 30 years ago. On paper, Plymouth remains the legal capital of Montserrat today, a city that exists in law, in memory, and in ash. Pripyat's three-day promise. On the morning of Saturday, April 26, 1986, Pripyat behaved like the young Soviet city it was. Children played outside, fishermen sat by the cooling pond of the Chernobyl power plant, and, as the engineer Grigory Medvedev later wrote, couples celebrated 16 weddings that day. A few miles away, reactor number 4 had exploded overnight and stood open to the sky. Pripyat was 16 years old, purpose-built for plant workers, with an average age around 26 by Soviet accounts. The next afternoon, a radio announcement told residents to switch off lights and water, close their windows, and stay calm for a short evacuation. People were told to take documents, a few essential belongings, and some food, and word spread that everyone would be home within about 3 days. Roughly 1,200 buses had been driven in from Kiev overnight and stood waiting, and by most estimates, close to 50,000 people left within a few hours. There was no panic, partly because no one understood this was permanent. Pets stayed behind, since animals were not allowed on the buses. Residents locked their doors, kept their keys, and rode away. The 3 days have now lasted 40 years. Varosha, behind the wire. A fence runs along one of the finest beaches in the Mediterranean, and behind it stand rows of dead hotels. Varosha was the resort quarter of Famagusta, Cyprus, and in the early 1970s, its beachfront towers made it one of the busiest holiday destinations in the region. Guidebooks and local lore say film stars like Elizabeth Taylor vacationed here, though hard proof is thin. In August 1974, Turkish forces advanced during the war that split Cyprus, and Varosha's Greek Cypriot residents fled within hours, most expecting to be back within days. The Turkish army fenced the quarter off instead, and a United Nations resolution from 1984 says only the original inhabitants may resettle it. For decades, stories described a resort frozen in place, with shop windows and cars waiting untouched. When parts of Varosha opened to visitors in 2020, reporters found something bleaker. The buildings had been stripped long ago, down to bare concrete in many cases, and half a century of salt air had done the rest. The people who once held keys to these hotels and homes are elderly now, scattered across Cyprus and beyond. Whether any of them will live behind that fence again is a question no one has answered since 1974. Wittenoom's blue dust. In the 1950s, children in Wittenoom, Western Australia, played in soft blue-gray hills as if they were sandboxes. The hills were tailings from the local mine, which dug crocidolite, blue asbestos, and the leftover dust was spread through town as free gravel, onto the racetrack, playgrounds, and driveways. A doctor named Eric Saint warned the state health department as early as 1948 that the dust would bring disease, yet the mine ran until 1966. The deaths arrived on a long delay, as asbestos diseases do. More than 2,000 former workers and residents have died of asbestos-related illness, and the toll is still climbing decades after the mine closed. Australia answered by deleting the town. Its power was cut, its name was painted off road signs and removed from maps, and its official status ended in 2007. The last resident, 80-year-old Lorraine Thomas, was removed from her home in 2022 by officials wearing protective suits, and demolition crews followed. One thread reaches further. About half of the blue asbestos mined here was shipped abroad during the post-war building boom, which means the dust that erased an Australian town may still sit inside walls on the other side of the world. The lead mountains of Picher. Why would gray mountains rise over a flat prairie town in Oklahoma? Picher sat at the heart of the tri-state mining district, and for decades, its mines poured out lead and zinc. The waste rock, called chat, was piled beside the streets until some heaps stood taller than a 10-story building, looming over schools and churches. Local histories hold that a large share of the lead in American ammunition in both world wars came from this district, a point of deep pride in town. Families paved their driveways with the same gravel, and in summer, local kids swam in flooded mine pits tinted orange by the minerals. Then the blood tests came. A screening in 1994 found roughly a third of the town's children with lead poisoning. the kind that causes lasting learning problems. Engineers later concluded that most of Picher stood over old mine cavities that could give way at any moment. Washington judged the ground impossible to clean and paid families to leave instead. In May 2008, a tornado tore across the emptying town, leaving at least 6 people dead and flattening about 150 homes. Picher was legally dissolved, and its final resident, Gary Linderman, stayed on alone until his death in 2015. The town that helped arm 2 world wars could not survive its own ore. The ghost city that woke up. Around 2010, television crews began arriving in Kangbashi, a brand new district of Ordos in Inner Mongolia, China, to film nothing. 6-lane avenues held no cars. Monumental bronze horses reared over an empty central plaza, and uniformed sweepers cleaned streets that nobody walked. Coal money had built a modern city faster than anyone would move into it, with plans that once called for as many as 1 million future residents before being scaled far back, while reporters, among them the writer Wade Shepard, put the real population near 30,000 at the low point. Western coverage crowned it the world's ghost city, a symbol of a Chinese real estate bubble waiting to burst, and American viewers saw those hollow towers on the evening news. Every other city in this story emptied out. Kangbashi ran in reverse, deserted in advance before its residents ever existed. Officials had already moved the municipal government into the new district. Some of the region's best schools came next, and families followed the classrooms. Within a decade of the ghost city headlines, the count had passed 100,000 people. The famous ghost city filled with children and traffic, a place that simply arrived years before its people. Erasing Time's Beach. In 1971, a stable owner named Judy Pripyat watched dozens of horses sicken and die at her Missouri arena after a contractor sprayed the grounds with waste oil to hold down dust. The contractor, Russell Bliss, sprayed the same oil on the dirt roads of Times Beach, a working-class town of some 2,000 residents on Route 66 near St. Louis. Bliss maintained he never knew what was in it. The oil had been mixed with chemical waste containing dioxin, a toxic byproduct tied to the production of Agent Orange for the Vietnam War. Federal investigators needed a decade to follow the trail, and in the first days of December 1982, they finished sampling the town's roads. Almost immediately, the Merrimack River flooded Times Beach under many feet of water, driving everyone out and spreading the contaminated soil through kitchens and bedrooms. 2 days before Christmas, with families still displaced, health officials confirmed the dioxin and warned residents in town to leave and those away to stay out. In February 1983, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Ann Burford, announced that Washington would purchase the entire town for more than $30 million, and every house was leveled. Years later, a senior federal health official said the danger had likely been overstated. The site is a state park now, and visitors picnic on the grass where the streets used to be.